Krishna, 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 Krishna. Hey, Hare, Hare, Krishna, Hare, Krishna, Krishna. Okay, we are online. And now the video. Here we are at Govardhan. So, okay, so we will start class by chanting Jai Radha Madhava. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Gopi Janaballabha Giri Bharat Hati Gopi Janaballabha Giri Bharat Hati Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Ran Umadhava Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Gopi Janaballabha Giri Bharat Hati Gopi Janaballabha Giri Bharat Hati Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunya Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravatakacharya Osatara Satashi Shima His Divine Grace Savaya Charanada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anandakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Shrividas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopi Gopinath Shyam Kunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Mathuram Ki Jai Jagatapasami Ki Jai Yamunamai Ki Jai Shrimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasad Guru Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Nami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachari Nivashesha Srinivali Paschatya Dejitarni. So Om Gana Timidanda Shah Gananjana Shalakaya Jaksur and Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances under the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, so kindly opened my eyes with a torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So we're continuing with our study of the Nectar of Devotion, which is the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu by Srila Rupa Goswami. So, first, of course, we are going to chant the prayers to the six Goswamis, at least that one stanza that we usually chant, that was written by Srinivasa Acharya. So, Nana Shastra Vichara Nakanipano Sadharma Samstapako Lokanam Hitakarano Tribhuvane Manyo Shananyakaro Radha Krishna Padaravinda Bhajana Nandena Maktal Liko Vande Rupa Sanatano Raghuyago Shri Jiva Kopala Ko. So translation is, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus they are honored all over the three worlds, and they are worth taking shelter of, because they are absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental, loving service of Radha and Krishna. That's very nice. Okay, so now we're going to go to the Nectar of Devotion. We're on chapter 7, which actually delineates or gives us many quotes about the principles we went through yesterday. And this chapter is called Evidence Regarding Devotional Practices. Let's see, let's go to that chapter. Hold on 1 second. We will share our screen. Evidence Regarding Devotional Principles. Okay, here we go. So, let's start with the first one. It's a good place to start. Anyway, so evidence regarding devotional principles. So remember, we start off with accepting the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. So we're going to elaborate on this a little bit. In the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd chapter, verse 21, Prabhupada tells Maharaj Nimi, my dear king, please know for certain that in the material world there is no happiness. It's like a drop of water in the desert. It doesn't quench your thirst. It just simply makes you more anxious for water. It is simply a mistake to think that there is happiness here because this place is full of nothing but miserable conditions. That appears very depressing. And actually, when the miserable conditions become alleviated to a certain extent, then we have this thing we call happiness. Any person who is seriously desirous of achieving real happiness must seek out a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of a spiritual master is that he must have realized the conclusion of the scriptures by deliberation and arguments, and thus be able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of the Supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, are understood as bona fide spiritual masters. Everyone should try to find such a bona fide spiritual master in order to fulfill his mission of life, which is to transfer himself to the plane of spiritual bliss. So let me read a little more. The purport is that one should not accept as spiritual master someone who is fool, number one, who has no direction according to the scriptural injunctions, whose character is doubtful, who does not follow the principles of devotional service, or has not conquered the influence of the 6 sense-gratifying agents. The 6 agents of sense gratification are the tongue, the genitals, the belly, anger, the mind, and words. Anyone who has practiced controlling these 6 is permitted to make disciples all over the world. To accept such a spiritual master is the crucial point for advancement in spiritual life. One who is fortunate enough to come under the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master is sure to traverse the path of spiritual salvation without any doubt. In other words, You really got to understand what makes a bona fide spiritual master and what makes a bogus spiritual master. Just like if someone is looking for gold, this is Prabhupada's example, one has to understand what is pyrite. Pyrite is actually fool's gold, and what is real gold. In the American West, many years ago, before any of you were born, when I was a child, there was a gold rush. And people were buying land, and people were selling land that didn't have any gold. And the way that they would sell land that didn't have any gold, or didn't have any real gold, is that they would produce this fool's gold for the people who were interested in buying land. And in this way, make a fool of the person who bought the land. So that's called fool's gold, pyrite. So anyway, so the point is you really have to know the difference between gold and fool's gold. In the same way you have to know the difference between a bona fide spiritual master and someone who's just a cheater, a cult leader, something like that. And, just trying to bewilder you by psychological manipulation or by mystical tricks or something like that. So one of the qualities, actually Prabhupada mentions 6 of the qualities here, and these, taking these 6 from the Upadeshamrita by Rupa Goswami. And it's a famous verse, Vacho Begam, Manasakrota Begam, Jiva Begam, Udu Pashta Begam, that one should be able to control or not be under the control of the tongue, belly, genitals, mind, anger, and words. In other words, to be able to tolerate the pushings and pullings that occur due to one having a body in this world. That's natural. And just tolerate and go on. And why do you go on? Because you have a goal in mind. The goal in mind is to please Krishna. So once one has a goal in mind, or a why, as I like to say, then it becomes a lot easier. But there are other qualities too, besides being able to tolerate all these things, because you have people who can tolerate all these things who are not bona fide spiritual masters. There's more qualities. One must actually, Samit Pani Shrotrium Brahmanishtam. Tad Viganartam Saguru Meva Vigachet. One must accept the spiritual master, and the spiritual master must be a humble servant of his spiritual master. Samit Pani Shrotrium. He must have heard nicely in accordance with what has been taught by his spiritual master, and the spiritual master must have heard what has been taught by his spiritual master, and actually whatever is being learned, whatever is being taught, has to come directly from God. Not that the spiritual master makes up something. That is not bona fide. So the spiritual master has to give the knowledge that is coming down in the cyclic succession from Krishna, because only Krishna can give us Dharma. Dharmam to Sakshat Bhagavat Pranitam. Sanatan Dharma, to be exact. Only Krishna can do that. So only people repeat the words of Krishna. They don't make up their own stupid philosophy. People do that all the time. Anyway, these are some of the qualities. And if you're fortunate enough to find someone like that, then you should examine to see if the person actually has those qualities. That's the business of a disciple, and the business of the guru is to examine the disciple. Observation, that's examination. Not that you have to give the spiritual master a test and see how many verses he's memorized, which would be kind of funny. So, next step is accepting initiation from the spiritual master and receiving instructions from him. Srila Prabhupada continued to speak to the king as follows: My dear king, the disciple has to accept the spiritual master, not only the spiritual master, but also as the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Super Soul. In other words, here's a kicker. In other words, the disciple should accept the spiritual master as God because the external manifestation of Krishna is not that the spiritual master is God, but he's representing God. He's like an ambassador of a country. If you want, or other governmental representatives, if you want to accomplish a particular thing. If you want a driver's license, you have to approach the representative of the government who will give you a driver's license after you take a test. So that's all. It's not that he is God with a big G, but he's a representative of the Lord. This is confirmed, but you have to make sure It's not that anybody can say, I'm a representative of God. Because if he actually says he is God, or if he's proud, or he has any demoniac qualities, then he's not a representative of God. If he's self-centered, like we were talking about this morning, even when one starts to make advancement in Krishna consciousness, the self-centeredness dissipates. So what to speak of someone who is posing as a spiritual master? He must have no self-centeredness. This is confirmed in every scripture, and a disciple should accept the spiritual master as such. One should learn Srimad Bhagavatam seriously and with all respect and veneration for the spiritual master. Hearing and speaking Srimad Bhagavatam is the religious process which elevates one to the platform of serving and loving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So basically, the spiritual master doesn't micromanage the life of the disciple. He's not a cult leader. He simply guides, he's more of a facilitator, facilitating the disciple to engage in Krishna's service according to the disciple's psycho-physical nature. The attitude of the disciple should be to satisfy the bona fide spiritual master. Then it will be very easy for him to understand spiritual knowledge. This is confirmed in the Vedas, and Rupa Goswami will further explain that for a person who has unflinching faith in God and the spiritual master, everything becomes revealed very easily. No, unflinching faith does not mean blind obedience. And it's really important to see the spiritual master through the eyes of Shastra. What does it mean to see through the eyes of Shastra? That the spiritual master is a person. This is called hermeneutics, to actually understand things properly, Shastra and the spiritual master. The spiritual master is a person, and he has personal likes and dislikes, which are not absolute. For example, I may like certain fruit, and Prabhupada may not like that particular fruit, or vice versa. You know, it's not that I'm right, Prabhupada's wrong. Of course, we should never say Prabhupada's wrong, but it's not that I am wrong and Prabhupada's right. There's relative stuff. The spiritual master comes down, and he's a person. He has his own personal opinion about things in this world. But when it comes to tattva, that means eternal spiritual truths and categories and Siddhanta, things like that. There's no difference between different spiritual masters. But there's difference in application, there's difference in attitude, and there's all sorts of differences because we're people. I mean, to think that everybody becomes like a clone, or like in Star Wars, you had the clone army that was trained up to be clones, or everybody becomes subject to the cookie cutter mentality is kind of stupid. The spiritual masters are not like that. Each and every one has their own personality and their own opinion about things in this world too. These are not absolutes. It's just not absolutes. But the absolutes have to do with Krishna, with Shastra and the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Spirit Soul, and anyway, all the great personalities in Shastra. You get the idea. So serving the spiritual master with faith and confidence. Regarding accepting initiation from the spiritual master in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 17th chapter, verse 27, is stated by Lord Krishna, "My dear Uddhava, the spiritual master must be accepted not only as my representative, but as my very self. He must never be considered on the same level as an ordinary human being. One should never be envious of the spiritual master as one may be envious of an ordinary man. The spiritual master should always be seen as the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by serving the spiritual master, one is able to serve all the demigods." Saves you a lot of trouble. So next one is following. So you remember, these are the principles or details that we went over in the previous chapter, just further elaborated on. Following the footsteps of saintly persons. In the Skanda Purana, it is advised that a devotee follow the past acharyas and saintly persons, because by such following, one can achieve the desired results with no chance of lamenting or being baffled in his progress. The scripture known as Brahma Yamala states as follows: "If someone wants to pose himself as a great devotee without following the authorities of revealed scriptures, then his activities will never help him to make progress in devotional service." Instead, he will simply create disturbances for the sincere students of devotional service. Those who do not strictly follow the principles of revealed scriptures are generally called sahajas, those who have imagined everything to be cheap or have their own concocted ideas, and who do not follow the scriptural injunctions. Such persons are simply creating disturbances in the discharge of devotional service. Just one other point about the guru principle and principle of authority. So we actually have three principles of authority that check and balance each other. One is guru, and the other one is shastra, the books given, the Vedic literatures, and the other one is sadhu, saintly persons. So all these are checks and balances, just like in the United States government. You have the executive, judicial, and legislative branches, which unfortunately right now are not checking each other. They're imbalanced, but that's another subject matter. But the founders of our great country wanted them to act as checks and balances against each other. And somehow or other, it ain't happening now. That's another subject matter. But in spiritual life, like if the guru says something, you have to see whether it's in Shastra. And if it's not in Shastra, it may be his personal opinion, which is all right. But it won't be against Shastra. What do I mean by against? Like if the guru says, well, maybe you should smoke marijuana to be Krishna. No, that's against Shastra. But the guru has some personal adaptation of Krishna consciousness, even like type of dress or type of methodology of presentation, which is fine. There's no problem with that. Like Prabhupada's methodology of presentation was different than his guru. Prabhupada had ladies living in the temple. Prabhupada was very liberal in ways that his guru was not liberal. But he never deviated from his guru. So to be a disciple doesn't mean that you imitate the guru. You understand the guru's mood in carrying out the mission of Krishna consciousness. In this connection, an objection may be raised by those who are not in devotional service and do not care for the revealed scriptures. An example of this is seen in Buddhist philosophy. Lord Buddha appeared in the family of a high-grade Kshatriya king, but his philosophy was not in accord with the Vedic conclusions, and therefore he was rejected. Under the patronage of a Hindu king, Maharaja Ashoka, the Buddhist religion was spread all over India and adjoining countries. However, after the appearance of the great stalwart teacher Shankaracharya, this Buddhism was driven out beyond the borders of India. So let me complete this and then we'll talk about Buddhism. The Buddhists or other religions who do not care for revealed scriptures sometimes say that there are many devotees of Lord Buddha who show devotional service to Lord Buddha and therefore should be considered devotees. In answer to this argument, Rupa Goswami says that the followers of Buddha cannot be accepted as devotees. Although Lord Buddha is accepted as an incarnation of Krishna, the followers of such incarnations are not very advanced in their knowledge of the Vedas. To study the Vedas means to come to the conclusion of the supremacy of the personality of Godhead. Therefore, any religious principle which denies the supremacy of the personality of Godhead is not accepted and is called atheism. Atheism means defying the authority of the Vedas and decrying the great acharyas who teach Vedic scriptures for the benefit of the people in general. Lord Buddha is accepted as an incarnation of Krishna in the Srimad Bhagavatam, but in the same Srimad Bhagavatam it is stated that Lord Buddha appeared in order to bewilder the atheistic class of men. Therefore, his philosophy is meant for bewildering the atheists and should not be accepted. If someone asks, why should Krishna propagate atheistic principles? The answer is that it was the desire of the personality of the Godhead to end the violence which was then being committed in the name of the Vedas. The so-called religionists were falsely using the Vedas to justify such violent acts as meat-eating, and Lord Buddha came to lead the fallen people away from such a false interpretation of the Vedas. Also for the atheists, Lord Buddha preached atheism so that they would follow him and thus be tricked into devotional service to Lord Buddha or Krishna. So let me unpack that whole thing. So, before Lord Buddha appeared, actually Buddha means the person who has intelligence, he was Prince Siddhartha. So anyway, so before he appeared, there was a problem with those who ostensibly followed the Veda, or the Vedas. And there were several problems. One problem was that those who ostensibly followed the Vedas were using the Vedas to cheat people. How? Because they established what was called, and what is called, the caste system. Caste system means that certain people were the priestly caste, in this particular concept, were the priestly caste by birth, and no one else could become a priest. Now you may say, well, what's the problem with that, Maharaj? Well, the problem with that is that this so-called priestly caste wanted to make money because it's Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga's mentioned that in Brahmin families, many people will be demons, or not devotees, or cheaters at least. Okay, don't want to use that pejorative word, demon. So anyway, so they were cheaters, and they wanted to keep the number of Brahmins down. Why do they want to keep the number of Brahmins down? Because if you keep the number of Brahmins down, the price that you can charge for doing priestly activities can rise. Now, if you've ever studied the law of supply and demand, which I did in the university, I will have you know, you will find that if you keep the supply of a particular object or service down, and the demand increases, or at least remains steady, then the price, if you keep the amount of that, not the price, but if you keep the amount of that particular, let's say, good or service down, the amount of people doing it, and the demand is steady or the demand increases, then the people who are performing that particular service or making that particular good can charge whatever they want. And that's called a monopoly. So the Brahmanas wanted to have a monopoly. Like, for example, if I was selling computers here in Hillsborough, a small town, and I was the only shop of selling computers, I would be pretty happy because people would have to come to me. But if there were 3 or 4 other shops, I'd be in trouble. It'd be too much competition. And competition is good in one respect. So the Brahmanas wanted to keep the number of Brahmanas down because you needed a Brahmin. What did you need a Brahmin for? What service do they perform? Well, guess what? They would do the name giving when you had a little kid. They would do a ceremony when you send your kid to school. They would perform the bar mitzvah. And then they would do the funeral. I know I'm just mixing religions here. The confirmation and the bar mitzvah. Then they performed the marriage. You needed one. And so they could charge whatever they damn pleased. So that was one reason why these Brahmins were exploiting the Vedic literatures. Another reason was that these Brahmanas, in order to justify the eating of meat and the killing of animals, took parts of the Vedas out of context and started killing animals in the name of the Vedic injunctions. Like, even if you go to India now, you'll see like a slaughterhouse, Kali slaughterhouse, sometimes even Ram slaughterhouse or something like that. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I mean, there are some injunctions, but they're meant for a different age, and they're meant for sacrifices in which the animal was immediately given another life, another body. And anyway, they're not really meant for this day and age. So the Brahmanas were doing those things, exploiting people, eating meat, perverting the whole meaning of the Vedic literatures. Therefore, they had to be taken away from the Vedas. If you're misusing something, let's say your parents give you something and you misuse it, the parents will say, you're not mature enough to use it. So Lord Buddha appeared to decry the Vedic literatures, but his primary teaching, one of his primary teachings was ahimsa paramodharma, which means nonviolence. And there's a whole story about Lord Buddha, how Lord Buddha was Siddhartha, the prince, and he was not exposed to birth, death, disease, and old age. When he finally got exposed to birth, death, disease, and old age, which his parents were trying to protect him from, he decided to renounce the world, perform severe austerities. Then he discovered that severe austerities were not the method to self-realization. He took upon himself what's called the middle path. And which is what Krishna says in the Gita too. Not eating too much, not eating too little, not sleeping too much, not sleeping too little. Mityahara viharasya. So anyway, and that's why Lord Buddha appeared. It was a trick by Krishna to take the Vedic literatures away from the little kiddies who didn't know how to use it, who were misusing, exploiting people, killing animals in the name of the Vedic literatures. And it was sort of a revolt in society against these so-called Brahmanas. There were other revolts too. Jainism was another revolt that occurred at the same time. And you had another religion called the Jain religion formed. And you also had people going to the forest and just like renouncing society completely. Okay, so then after Buddha did his thing, and Buddha is an incarnation of Krishna, and as Prabhupada said, people are tricked into worshiping Krishna when they're worshiping Buddha. And they actually worship Buddha in a similar fashion to how we worship Krishna, often in a sense. Supposed to be vegetarians. But nowadays, it's hard to find a Buddhist who is a vegetarian. They have all sorts of excuses that justify or so-called justify them eating meat. One excuse is if someone gives them something in their begging bowl, they have to accept it and eat it. Now, that's a pretty lame excuse. But they're supposed to be vegetarians, as are many Christian sects, such as the Benedictines, such as the Franciscans, but nary, I couldn't say nary one, I would say very few of them are actually vegetarians. Very, very few of them vegetarians. They make excuses because they can't control their senses. So then after Lord Buddha took everyone away from the Vedic literatures and Buddhism was spread all over India, we had Shankaracharya, who brought people back to the Vedic literatures, teaching essentially something that was very similar to Buddhism, but using the Vedic literatures to teach it. So he didn't teach pure Krishna consciousness. And then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brought everybody back full circle. But Shankaracharya actually drove 98% of the Buddhists out of India. So you'll find some of them in northern India, but mostly the Buddhists are in Nepal, in Thailand, in Burma, and other places like that, and also in Ceylon or Sri Lanka. So anyway, so inquiring about eternal religious principles. In the Narada Purana it is said that one is actually very serious about devotional service, then all of his purpose will be served without any delay. So eternal religious principles means going beyond the rituals that you do. You know, we all do so many rituals during the day. You know, we put on tilak, we put on a dhoti or sari or whatever like that. And then we should always ask, you know, why are we doing these things? Does it fulfill our purpose? What is eternal? The dhoti is not eternal. This style of tilak is not eternal. The sika is not eternal. So what is eternal? So we get to the whole discussion of tattva, again, tattva, which means the different eternal categories like the Supreme Lord, the living entity, the nature of the living entity, the nature of the Supreme Lord, the nature of the material world, the nature of time, and the nature of karma, which are the 5 subjects in the Bhagavad Gita, according to Baladev Vijabhushana. So these are the important subjects. The external things can change. So you actually should inquire, you know, what is eternal? You know, what is unchangeable? Not just cultural. So we have so many people attached to cultural things, and they're scared of giving up their cultural things. Just like in Fiji, when someone joins our Krishna consciousness movement, sometimes they're afraid of stopping to worship the demigods. Because they're afraid, they're just like conditioned. They don't want to give it their cultural thing. So sometimes I have to say to them, all right, you put the demigods at a lower level on the altar, offer them some respect, and offer them the prasad after you offer it to Krishna. Okay? Because people are very much afraid. They're attached to external things. Their whole sense of identity is based on external things. So we have to be free thinking, understand what is eternal and what is temporary adjustments. And sometimes we have to make temporary adjustments in light of achieving the eternal. Got it? It's important. Okay. Being prepared to give up everything for material for Krishna's satisfaction. In the Padma Purana is stated, from one who has given up his material sense enjoyment and accepted the principles of devotional service, the opulence of Vishnu Loka, the kingdom of God, is awaiting. So it's not that you have to give up all sense gratification, but you enjoy your senses in accordance with the regulated principles. You don't give up eating. You eat prasadam. Enjoy. You don't have to give up dancing. You dance for Krishna. And then your sense enjoyment becomes spiritualized. So don't get scared. Residing in a sacred place. In the Skanda Purana it is also said that for a person who has lived in Dwarka for 6 months, for 1 month, or even 1 fortnight, that's 2 weeks, there's a waiting elevation to the Vaikuntha Lokas and all the prophets of Sarupya Mukti. Remember, Sarupya Mukti means the privilege of having the same four-handed bodily features as Narayan. I don't want that. I want to have 2 hands and serve Krishna. In the Brahma Purana, it is said the transcendental significance of Purushottama Kshetra, which is the 80 square mile field of Lord Jagannath, cannot be properly described. Even the demigods from higher planetary systems see the inhabitants of the Jagannath Puri as having exactly the same bodily features possessed by one in Vaikuntha. That is, the demigods see the inhabitants of Jagannath Puri as being four-handed. So these special holy places, even the temples, they have a different atmosphere in them. Even sometimes we bring our workers here who are just doing construction for us, they're just hired people. And they say, wow, we really appreciate the atmosphere. They don't know what's going on. They have no idea of the philosophy. They're not even vegetarians. But they experience the spirituality of the atmosphere. If you go to Vrindavan, you'll experience that for sure. When there was a meeting of the great sages at Naimisharanya, Sutta Goswami was reciting Srimad Bhagavatam, and the importance of the Ganges was stated as follows. The water of the Ganges are always, of the Ganges are always carrying the flavor of the tulasi offered at the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, and as such, the waters of the Ganges are ever flowing, spreading the glories of Lord Krishna. Wherever the waters of the Ganges are flowing, all will be sanctified both externally and internally. So, accepting only what is necessary. That doesn't mean you have to be poverty-stricken. You just need to know what your needs are. Everybody has different needs. Don't criticize someone for having more needs than you. And don't try to acquire too much. I mean, if you can sleep in one bed, why do you need a 100-room mansion? It's practical. In the Naradiya Purana, it is directed, one should not accept more than necessary if he is serious about discharging devotional service. The purport is that one should not neglect following the principles of devotional service, nor should one accept the rulings of devotional service, which are more than what he can easily perform. This is very interesting. Sometimes you have different rituals, procedures that just go, oh my God. And they would drive you crazy, especially in deity worship, it's like that. Or in so many different areas. Just what you can easily perform and continue chanting the holy name of Krishna with love and devotion. If that's all you can do, that's fantastic. For example, it may be said that one should chant the Hare Krishna mantra at least 100,000 times daily on his beads. That would be a little less than 64 rounds. But if this is not possible, then one must minimize his chanting according to his capacity. Generally, we recommend our disciples to chant at least 16 rounds on their japa beads daily, and this should be completed. But if one is not even able to chant 16 rounds, then he must make it up the next day. If we encourage offenses, we shall not be able to make progress in devotional service. It is better if one fixes up a regulative principle according to his own ability, and then follows that vow without fail. That will make him advanced in spiritual life. So in other words, when Prabhupada first came to America, he said to the devotees, some of his first devotees, you should all chant 64 rounds a day. And they go, oh my God, that would take us at least 8 to 10 hours a day. And they said, can't do it. And Prabhupada said, all right, boys and girls, yeah, you could chant 32 rounds. And they said, woo-wee. Can you give us a special dispensation? Prabhupada said, okay, 16 rounds, but no less. And generally, I'm chanting much more than 16 rounds every day. Prabhupada said 16 rounds minimum. Like today, let me look at my beads right now. I chanted so far 23 rounds. And that's without even trying. Because when I was walking somewhere or doing my exercise, walking exercise, not exercise by lifting weights and chanting. But when I was doing my exercise, I chant. And I chant off the beads too. God knows how many rounds I chant off the beads. And I chant when I am sleeping, not on the beads. It's better if one fixes up a regulated principle according to his own ability and then follows that vow without fail. That will make him advance in spiritual life. Next one is observing fasting on Ekadashi. So what is Ekadashi? Let's explain what it is. We follow the moon calendar, not the sun calendar. And all traditional cultures follow the moon calendar, months based on the moon. So you would delineate each month by the Krishna Paksha and the Gaura Paksha. Now, let me explain what I mean. The Krishna Paksha is when the moon is getting less and less and less and less, what do we call it? Full moon, half moon, quarter moon, little sliver, crescent, no moon, which is called new moon. Got it? And then after that, it gets bigger. That's the Gaura Paksha, or the light half of the month. Bigger, like little crescent, quarter moon, third moon, half moon, like that. And finally you get the full moon, which is called the Purnima. Okay? The month begins on the Purnima, the full moon. And then goes to the new moon, which is the no moon. I know it's new moon. And then, again, it goes to the full moon. So you got the cycles like that. That's about 14 days, okay? Each cycle is 14 days, 14, 28. So that doesn't exactly match our present month, the solar month, which is 28 days. Some of them are 28 days, some are 30, and some are 31. So anyway, 30 days has September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31, except for February, which has 28. How about that? So anyway, so it doesn't match. So there's, in the Vedic system, there's a leap month added, which is called Purushottama month. Okay? So let's mention what the Ekadashi is. So let's say you got the full moon at the beginning of the month. Okay, full moon, I see you shine. Anyway, there's another song. So let's say you have the full moon at the beginning of the month. Then the first day after the full moon is called day 1. Second day, day 2. Third day, day 3. Of course, they use Sanskrit names. So when they get to the 11th day is Ekadasi. That's what it means. 11th day, and that's it. Astrologically, spiritually, it's the best day to minimize your eating and sleeping and engage more in chanting Krishna, which we're going to read here. So, anyway, so that's the, so you fast from grains and beans. Some people fast completely. Some people don't sleep on that whole day. I've never done that, and it's too austere for me. So anyway, so you fast from grains and beans and heavy food. You eat very simple food. And then the next day you break the fast. Okay? That's Ekadashi. And that's 2 Ekadashis in every month. Okay? Because there's 2 halves of the moon cycle. And every month. So anyway, that's Ekadashi. In the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, it said that one who observes fast in Ekadashi is freed from all kinds of reactions to sinful activities and advances in pious life. The basic principle is not just to fast, but to increase one's faith and love for Govinda, Krishna. The real reason for observing fasting and Ekadashi is to minimize the demands of the body and to engage our time in the service of the Lord by chanting or performing similar service. The best thing to do on fasting days is to remember the pastimes of Govinda and to hear his holy name constantly. So I chant more. on Ekadashis, and when I can, I will chant 64 rounds on Ekadashi. Okay, next one is offering respects to the banyan trees. In the Skanda Purana, it is directed that the devotee should offer water to the tulsi plant and amalaka trees. He should offer respect to the cows and to the Brahmins, and should serve the Vaishnavas by offering them respectful obeisances and meditating upon them. All these processes will help the devotee to diminish the reactions to his past sinful activities. Giving up the company of non-devotees. Lord Chaitanya was once asked by one of his household devotees what the general behavior of a Vaishnava should be. In this connection, Lord Chaitanya replied that a Vaishnava should always give up the company of non-devotees. Then he explained that there are two kinds of known devotees. One class is against the supremacy of Krishna, and another class is too materialistic. In other words, those who are after material enjoyment and those who are against the supremacy of the Lord are called a Vaishnava, and their company should be strictly avoided. Of course, we can be friendly with them, with people like that. We should see everybody as a devotee. As I mentioned last night, I don't see people as devotees and non-devotees. I see people as everyone is a devotee. Just some people have forgotten it. Some people have amnesia. So that is how I take this particular statement. In the Katyayana Samhita, it is stated that even if one is forced to live within a cage of iron or live in the midst of blazing fire, he should accept this position rather than live with non-devotees who are through and through against the supremacy of the Lord. So, if someone's actually blasphemous and against God, that's a different thing. I think everybody in every religion would believe in that, except that. Similarly, in the Vishnu Sahasrara, there's a statement to the effect that one should prefer to embrace a snake, a tiger, or an alligator rather than associate with persons who are worshippers of various demigods, impelled by material desire. So you're talking about people who are against Krishna consciousness. In the scriptures, it is instructed that one may worship a certain demigod if he is desirous of achieving some material gain. For example, one is advised to worship the sun god if he is desirous of getting rid of a diseased condition. For a beautiful wife, one may worship Uma, the wife of Lord Shiva, and for advanced education, one may worship Saraswati. Similarly, there is a list in the Srimad Bhagavatam for worshippers of all demigods, according to different material desires, but all these worshippers, although they appear to be very good devotees of the demigods, are still considered to be non-devotees. They cannot be accepted as devotees. So, these are specifically people who decry the exclusive worship of God, and that's what you have to avoid. But most people are innocent, so we don't avoid them. We see them as devotees. We interact. We're friendly. We're loving. The Mayavadis in person say that one may worship any form of the Lord, and it doesn't matter because one reaches the same destination anyway. But it is clearly stated in the Bhagavad Gita that those who are worshippers of the demigods will ultimately reach only the planets of the demigods, while those who are devotees of the Lord himself will be promoted to the Lord's abode, the kingdom of God. So actually, these persons who are worshippers of demigods have been condemned in the Gita. It is described that due to their lusty desires, they have lost their intelligence and have therefore taken to worship the different demigods. So in the Vishnu Rahasya, these demigod worshippers are forcefully condemned by the statement that it is better to live with the most dangerous animals than to associate with these persons. So, kamaistashta vitigyana prapajante nadevata. So that's pretty self-explanatory. So the people we have to avoid are worshippers of demigods and Mayavadis, those who decry, basically anyone who is critical of worship of God. And so we would be happy to associate with people in any religion who actually worship God and love God, like I've given the example many times before, that sometimes I go to different religious ceremonies, Christian religious ceremonies, because that's what we have here in America. And I appreciate their devotion to God. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, our great Acharya, in his Chaitanya Shikshamrita states that we should simply see that everybody who is worshiping God is worshiping God in a different way and appreciate what they're doing, even though culturally it may be different, philosophically it may have a slightly different understanding, but they're accepting God. So we appreciate that, and we associate with people like that. But people who are against God, inimical to God, atheists, just like take as their whole life to decry the existence of God. That's a different thing. Not accepting unfit disciples, constructing many temples, or reading many books. Another stricture is that a person may have many disciples, but he should not act in such a way that he'd be obliged to any of them for some particular action or favor. And one should also not be enthusiastic about constructing new temples, nor should one be enthusiastic about reading various types of books, save and except the ones which lead to the advancement of devotional service. Practically, if one very carefully reads Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, which occurred before the presentation of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and this nectar devotion, that will give him sufficient knowledge to understand the science of Krishna consciousness. One need not take the trouble of reading other books. In the 7th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, 13th chapter, verse 8, Narada Muni, while discussing with Maharaja Yudhishthira the various functions of the different orders of society, especially mentions rules for the sannyasis, those persons who have renounced this material world. One who has accepted the sannyasa of life is forbidden to accept as a disciple anyone who is not fit. A sannyasi should first of all examine whether a prospective student is sincerely seeking Krishna consciousness. If he is not, he should not be accepted. However, Lord Chaitanya's causeless mercy is such that he advised all bona fide spiritual masters to speak about Krishna consciousness everywhere. Therefore, in the line of Lord Chaitanya, even the sannyasis can speak about Krishna consciousness everywhere, and if someone is seriously inclined to become a disciple, the sannyasi always accepts him. Because we take a risk for pleasing Krishna. The one point is that without increasing the number of disciples, there's no propagation of the cult of Krishna consciousness. Therefore, sometimes even at a risk, a sannyasi, what is the risk? You get karma. A sannyasi in the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu may accept even a person who is not thoroughly fit to become a disciple. Later on, by the mercy of such a bona fide spiritual master, the disciple is gradually elevated. However, if one increases the number of disciples simply for some prestige or false honor, he will surely fall down in the matter of executing Krishna consciousness. Similarly, let's see how much more we got to go on this one. Ooh, that's quite a bit. Okay. I think. Okay. So we'll end with reading many books. Okay, so let's take some questions now, since we covered quite a bit, and some of it might be a little controversial. Let me give you a chance to ask questions. All right. Who wants to ask a question?
Dandavats to you, Maharaj. This is
Oh,
Ujjwala
Shiva
Rasai.
Rasaya.
Yes, yeah. Hari.
Haribol.
Again, please ignore the noise again. Sorry, Maharaj. So, I am still struck at that beautiful point that you made the other day. Beautifully struck, which is really good. You know, the situation that you were, you really nailed it down, that the situation is really important. You know, that wanting to serve Krishna. That was a beautiful one. Maharaj, my question is in regards to, I can understand that a little bit and comprehend a little bit when you're saying that situation of wanting to serve Krishna all the time. But regarding this transcendental world, Maharaj, when we say Nama, Rupa, Guna, Leela, again, little bit of comprehension goes for Nama and maybe a little bit for qualities, but unable to really make out, grasp anything about the Rupa, the form. Transcendence having a form, that's one thing. And so are these transcendental personalities, Lord Krishna, his associates, are they, please excuse my questioning, but I'm just saying it out, are they really present? Yes, they are. Otherwise, why would Bhaktivinoda Thakur say, okay, I'm stopping it now, I will have to go, I've seen Lord Krishna like that. So if you could kindly say something in regards to the transcendental form, and maybe the activities will be a little bit understood when this part is explained, Maharaj.
Okay, so what she was asking about was that I made a comment that in the holy name of the Lord, it's not just my comment, it's actually the comment of the Acharyas, you have nama, guna, rupa, and lila contained of the Lord. So nama, of course, is the name. That's easy to understand. And of course, and then guna, the qualities of the Lord become manifest to one. And then rupa, the form of the Lord, becomes manifest to one. And finally, the lila becomes manifest to one. So, to explain it, let's see, how do we explain it? Well, trying to use some science fiction explanation. Like there's a simultaneous to whatever is happening in this dimension, or our three dimensions, there's a higher dimension of spiritual reality that is right there, for lack of a better word, right there in front of us. So we can pierce through or view that dimension of spirituality when our consciousness is vibrating to the same frequency. I'm just using metaphorical analysis right now, so please don't tear apart my analysis. When our consciousness is at that spiritual frequency, we can actually see into that other dimension. Just like, let me give an example from the Bhagavad Gita. When Sanjaya, and everybody's heard of Sanjaya, Sanjaya was the secretary of Dhritarashtra. Sanjaya was given the blessing that he could perceive what was happening on the battle of Kurukshetra, that is the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, and of course all the fighting on the battle of Kurukshetra, and be able to relate what was happening to his master, who is Dhritarashtra. So that was the spiritual vision. Another example I can give, which is coming from Prabhupada, it says the pure devotee has spiritual television. Just like we can turn, of course, hardly anyone has television anymore. Anyway, spiritual internet. Prabhupada said spiritual television. I'm saying spiritual internet, which is pretty much the same thing. So, for example, if you have a television, let's go back to television. I'm from the old school. You can tune in to a particular channel, and if you have the right frequency, you can appreciate the name, the qualities, nama, guna, rupa, lila, the form of the people on the television, and what they're doing, right? It's all a question of having the right mechanism, and you can perceive something that is going on thousands and thousands of miles away through the medium of television. So Prabhupada did compare the pure devotee's vision to be something like spiritual television, which the pure devotee can tune in on the Lord's pastimes. So the chanting of Hare Krishna purifies, it cleanses the mirror of the heart, so we can actually perceive this spiritual dimension and literally see, because Krishna is there, we can actually pierce through the dimensional, or whatever, the coverings of the material universe, however you want to put it. And actually, what is that statement in science fiction, a wormhole or something like that? You can actually, sorry, because my background is in science and science fiction, I have to use all these examples. And we can actually see the spiritual reality and see the Leela of Krishna. And you have great devotees like Srinivasacharya, who could go into meditation and not only see and interact in the pastimes of Radha and Krishna, but he could bring back things from the spiritual realm. And that's even more amazing. I mean, it's one thing to see, but it's another thing. Let's say if I was sitting in the temple chanting my japa, and all of a sudden I brought back Krishna's flute with me. That would be pretty Interesting. Or it brought back Krishna's mobile phone. Oh, sorry, Krishna doesn't have a mobile phone. It's better if I. That would be, but great devotees can do that because it's Krishna's pastimes that are happening here. It's just our illusion or Maya or our coverings that keep us from seeing it. It's just like another example Prabhupada gave about someone who has cataracts. Now in India, people get cataracts and they're really bad before they get operated on. Some people go blind because of cataracts. I mean, I'll give you an example of my own life. I had cataract surgery about 7 or 8 years ago, I think. So as soon as I had cataract surgery, I was amazed at how the world looked. The colors were bright. I could see how old I was. Oh, sorry. No, I already could see that. That was the only problem with having cataract surgery. I could see my reflection in the mirror. No, I could see before that. But I could see things that in just in an amazing way by having cataract surgery. So Prabhupada gave that example that the world is there. We have cataracts. And sometimes you have people completely blind and they have an operation. And for the first time in their lives, they see things that they didn't know looked like that. Of course, they didn't know how anything looked. So it's like that. Krishna is giving us transcendental vision. Premanjana charita bhakti vilochanena shantak shadaiva Riddhyeshu vilokayanti yam shaima shindra machinchi guna svarupam govina maripurasham tamaham pajami. So yes, it opens up a window to the spiritual world. Or as one person who wasn't a devotee says, the doors of perception are opened. Anyway,
Right.
does that
Very
answer the
nice.
question?
Yes, yes, very nice, Maharaj. So, especially when you said tuning to the frequency. So, does that mean that our frequency will be tuned to what is needed? Is that what?
Yeah. Yes,
Things?
yes, we'll be tuned to the right frequency.
Right.
The frequency is Hare Krishna, Krishna
Right.
Krishna, Hare Rama, 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 Hare Hare. That's the frequency. When you tune to it, then you'll be able to perceive it, the Nama, Guna, Rupa, Leela. And yeah, it does happen. And actually, if you want to see the Rupa, just come to see Radha Golokananda.
Yes, Maharaj. Yes, yes, yes.
And if you want to see their Leela, you'll see how they are. Anyway, they're giving me a hard time sometimes. Dealing with disciples, that's their Leela. So anyway, so and what is the Guna?
Hare Krishna, Gurudev.
Krishna is very tricky. All right, so let's Rishikesh ask a question. He's
Hare
jumping the
Krishna,
gun.
Gurudev. I had a question about the animal slaughter. When
Yeah,
Buddha appeared, there was not. I mean, it was like a controlled one. Through
yeah,
sacrifices. But now it's like official slaughterhouses. Which is far worse than what Buddha had appeared for.
yes, it's far
So
worse.
why
It's actually
far more
far
worse?
worse.
So why?
But
How can we
nowadays,
stop these people?
they're not doing it in the name of religion. That's the difference.
Oh, okay.
When Buddha was there, it was all everyone was thinking we're Vedic, and they were killing animals even at times that were not prescribed by the Vedic literatures. The Vedic literatures say you could eat a goat by sacrificing once a month to the goddess Kali.
Uh-huh.
But they were eating all sorts of animals. You know what a murgi is?
Right.
A murgi? It's a chicken.
Ah, okay.
They were eating chickens, goats, everything. And so anyway, what was I going to say about that? Yeah, it was wholesale slaughter of animals in the name of religion. Oh yeah, what I was going to say about that is that Jesus Christ also opposed that. Because in the temple in Jerusalem, which is the seat of the Jewish religion, Jerusalem, they were slaughtering lambs. And, they thought, people would bring a lamb in to be slaughtered and then they would eat it afterwards. And that's what people were doing before Buddha appeared. They were bringing animals to the Brahmin saying, can you ritualistically slaughter this and give it to me afterwards? And they thought it was justified. Also, in the Jewish religion, you have these people called kosher butchers. That you would go, your butcher had to be almost like a priest butcher. And you had to go to him to purchase your meat. And you had to eat meat of a certain, anyway, I'm not going to get into what the whole thing was. So practically in every religion, there's some injunction about ritualistic slaughter. And that is not meant for this particular day and age. And it's prohibited, actually, in this particular day and age. And it's been misused in many different ways. So anyway, it's horrible what's going on right now in America and all over the world, India, everywhere. With the
Brother, how can we stop these people? I mean, it's just so impossible. It looks so impossible to even stop these people.
I don't know. It's a good question. Giving them prasadam, preaching. We have to preach more. I think it looks like an impossible task, but Prabhupada said impossible is a word in the Fool's Dictionary. So we have to take this task upon ourselves. I mean, even right now, there's many more vegetarians than there ever been before in the Western world.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
There's so many vegetarian restaurants. One of my disciples just opened up a vegetarian delicatessen. I don't know if you know what a delicatessen is. Probably you know. Anyway, and I can show you the picture right now. I have it as a. I have it.
Is it in Japan?
It's in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's in Portland, Oregon. I'll just show you for a second as a backdrop. All right, here it is. See?
Oh yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful. He just sent me a whole bunch of vegetarian things that he makes there. I mean, he makes vegetarian fish, vegetarian chicken. I mean, it's actually great what he's doing. Anyway, so I mean, things are happening by Lord Chaitanya's mercy. I mean, there's a lot of bad things happening in the world today. I can't emphasize that enough. But there's also a bright side that the Maha Mantra can be spread very widely. In India, our movement is accepted widely. And, Modi comes to our temple regularly for different reasons. And so, anyway, things are happening. We have to be patient. I mean, the Christian religion was not spread very quickly. It took hundreds of years for it to become prominent until a king, the Emperor Justinian, accepted it and then made everybody Christian. Even Buddhism wasn't accepted until the Emperor Ashoka spread it all over India. So it really takes like a political leader who accepts something to really change the face of people, change the habits of people. So I don't expect Trump to be that political leader who does that.
He himself is a hardcore meat eater. He eats meat.
Who does?
Trump.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, one day he will have tilak on and be chanting Hare Krishna some future lifetime because he did some service. He arranged for a Rath Yatra in New York many, many years ago by giving the facility to the devotees. So even by that little service, someone like him in the future, not this lifetime, will actually take up Krishna consciousness. There's great hope, even for him. So Vijay Radhika said there's something called an impossible burger and plant-based burger. People are going more and more for plant-based. There's a wonderful movie which is called The Game Changers. I don't know if any of you have seen that movie. It's about vegetarianism and how you can be just as strong, just as intelligent, just as Krishna conscious by being a vegetarian. So there's hope. There's hope by Prabhupada's mercy. I mean, Krishna has a plan. Krishna is God. He can do anything. He can make everybody Krishna conscious in 1 second. But he wants us to work at it. Like Prabhupada said that Lord Chaitanya could have spread Krishna consciousness himself. And the devotees asked, why didn't he do it? And Prabhupada said because he wanted to let Prabhupada do it. He wanted to glorify Prabhupada. So don't worry, be happy. Okay, time to end. It is time, and we'll see everybody tomorrow evening to continue this chapter of the Nectar of Devotion. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Gurudev ki jai.